My name is Margaret Ellison. I'm 72 years old. I've lived in this house on Monterey Square for more than 40 years. Long enough to know how the light falls through the kitchen window at every hour. That evening, as I set the table for Sunday dinner, the glass bowls caught the last of its soft gold turning sharp as it slid across the silverware. David and his wife, Emily, were due any minute. I'd roasted a chicken the way David liked as a boy, with thyme and lemon tucked under the skin. It was my small ritual of normalcy. When the doorbell rang, Emily's laughter reached me before her perfume did something sweet and expensive that never quite masked the vinegar beneath. "Oh, Margaret," she said, stepping inside. "You still manage so well at your age." The words landed gently, but they stung. David kissed my cheek, oblivious. Already talking about a project at work, Emily drifted behind him, rearranging the napkins I'd folded, moving a candle an inch to the left. "Just so it looks balanced," she murmured. At the table, the conversation skipped across safe topics David's clients, a new listing Emily was thrilled about. The humidity. She complimented my cooking twice and then added, "I'm amazed you still use the old gas oven. It must be tricky." "Dear," I smiled. "It works fine." "Oh, of course it does," she said, tone dripping with sugar. "You've always been so capable." Her eyes lingered on me a second too long. I felt the air tighten. When dessert came, David excused himself to take a call. Emily reached for a glass of wine and knocked it over. It shattered on the tile. For a beat. Only the clock ticked. I bent down to pick up the pieces, but Emily's hand touched my arm light, deliberate. "Be careful, Margaret," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "We wouldn't want another accident." I looked up. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. David returned, asking nothing, noticing nothing. We finished dinner in brittle politeness. Every sound amplified the scrape of a fork, the hum of the refrigerator, my own heart thudding far too loud. When they finally left, I washed the dishes slowly, the house settling around me. Somewhere between the clink of porcelain and the hiss of running water, I realized the evening had changed something I couldn't yet name, but I would soon learn to. A week after that dinner, I couldn't find my house keys. I had placed them, as always, in the small ceramic bowl by the entryway, a habit so old it was almost muscle memory. I searched the counters, the drawers, even the refrigerator once, absurdly hoping they might appear somewhere obvious. Nothing. When Emily stopped by the next morning with a bag of groceries for convenience, I mentioned it lightly. "Strange thing," I said. "My keys are gone." She tilted her head, smiling in that careful way she had. "You've been under stress, Margaret. It's easy to misplace things at your age." Her tone was honey, but the words clung like glue. Later that week, 2 envelopes disappeared from my desk bank statements I'd left unopened. Planning to review them with David, I tore the drawers apart before finally calling him. He sounded tired. "Mom, maybe you just forgot where you put them. Emily says you've been a little distracted lately." Something inside me went still. Distracted. Forgetful. Those were the words people used before they stopped trusting you. That evening, I sat in the living room, staring at the bowl by the door. My keys rested there, gleaming under the lamp. I hadn't found them. Someone had put them back. Someone had placed them back her hand. I couldn't be sure. The thought made my stomach twist. The thought made my stomach twist. I told myself it was a misunderstanding. Things get moved. Mail gets lost. Still, I found myself locking my bedroom door at night, listening for sounds I couldn't name. When Emily came again on Sunday, she brought tulips and a new tone of sympathy. "We all have these moments," she said, arranging the flowers. "It's nothing to be embarrassed about." Her hand brushed my shoulder light, reassuring, and lingered just long enough to make me doubt whether reassurance was what she meant at all. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I came home from the grocery store, balancing a paper bag against my hip. And the key wouldn't turn. I tried again, harder this time. The lock clicked uselessly, unrecognizable beneath my hand. For a moment, I thought I'd made a mistake, that perhaps I'd taken the wrong key. But no, it was mine. I called David. He didn't answer. So I called Emily. She arrived 15 minutes later, radiant as always, as if she had been expecting the call. "Oh, Margaret," she said, her voice full of gentle concern. "I forgot to tell you we had the locks changed yesterday. There's been a string of break-ins nearby. David thought it would make you feel safer." She slipped a new key into my hand, the cold metal pressing a mark into my palm. "You should have told me," I murmured. "I meant to," she said with a sympathetic smile. "Things have just been so busy lately, inside." The house felt different. The air was faintly perfumed, and the furniture gleamed with the scent of polish I hadn't bought. My husband's photo, the one in the brass frame by the mantel, was gone. When I asked, Emily frowned thoughtfully. "It must have fallen when I was dusting. I'll find it." She didn't. That evening, David finally called back, apologetic, but distracted. "Em said she told you about the locks." He said, "She just wants to help. She's been changing things." I said quietly, "Little things." He sighed. "Mom, please, don't start. She's trying her best." The line went silent before he hung up. When night settled, I sat by the window with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Outside, the streetlights flickered against the moss-draped oaks, painting the porch in restless shadows. The house creaked, familiar yet foreign, like it was adjusting to someone else's presence. I glanced at the mantel, at the empty space where his photo should have been. For the first time in 40 years, the house didn't feel like home. It felt like a place I was only renting, waiting for permission to belong again. It started with a bill. I had found it in the mail that morning, an unfamiliar credit statement with my name printed neatly across the top. The balance was high enough to make my pulse quicken. I'd never owned that card. When I asked David, he promised to look into it, distracted as always. Emily called later, her voice soft, measured. "Oh, that," she said lightly. "I must have used your address for a business account. It's all taken care of. Don't worry yourself." But I did worry. For hours. I sat at the kitchen table, reading the same line on the statement over and over until the numbers blurred. When evening came, I called her again. "Emily, I need you to explain this properly." She arrived within half an hour. She didn't knock. She never did anymore. "You seem upset," she said, but closing the door behind her. "David told me you've been anxious lately." I laid the bill on the table between us. "This isn't anxiety," I said. "It's fraud." Her smile didn't waver. "Big word." "Margaret, I'm sure it's just confusion." The air felt heavier. She stepped closer, her perfume sweet and suffocating. "You've been forgetting things," she whispered. "Maybe you even signed something and don't remember." I pushed the paper toward her. "Leave," I said. She laughed softly, shaking her head as if speaking to a child. "You're so dramatic." Then, suddenly, her hand was at my throat. The move was swift, almost graceful, as if she'd rehearsed it. Her eyes gleamed, calm and sharp. "Die quietly, Margaret," she whispered, her voice barely more than breath. "You make too much noise." My mind fractured into silence. The room narrowed. I remember the smell of lemon cleaner, the glint of the brass knob on the stove, the pulse of light from the porch lamp flickering through the curtain. My fingers clawed at her wrist, but the world went soft at the edges, dimming like a lamp turned low. When I opened my eyes, I was on the floor. The tiles were cool beneath my cheek. Emily stood near the counter, phone pressed to her ear, her tone trembling with practiced panic. "David, it's your mom." She fainted again. I think she hit her head. I'm so scared. I lay still, every breath burning, my throat raw where her fingers had been. She turned slightly, glancing over her shoulder. Her expression was serene, almost pitying. Then she walked out to wait for David, her voice floating through the doorway like a hymn. I stayed on the floor until the house was quiet again. My body hurt, but something else had shifted deeper inside me, a calm, cold awareness. I had spent months doubting my own memory. Now I didn't doubt anything at all. Carla didn't ask questions when I appeared at her door that night, still wearing the same clothes. My scarf pulled high to hide the bruises. She just opened her arms. The scent of coffee and lavender soap filled her hallway, grounding me in a world that still made sense. She helped me to the guest room, a small space lined with old photographs and a handmade quilt. When I finally found my voice, it came out thin and uneven. I told her everything. Every missing key, every lie, every cruel smile. Her expression shifted from disbelief to anger, then to something quieter fear. You have to go to the police, she said. Now. I shook my head. She'll deny it. David will believe her. Carla pressed her lips together. Then what are you going to do? I looked down at my hands. Still trembling. I need proof. Not pity. We sat in silence for a long time, the old clock ticking between us. My throat ached, but my thoughts had never been clearer. When I finally stood to pour some water, my eyes caught a small notebook on the shelf, a gardening journal filled with my late husband's handwriting. It reminded me of the notebook he kept in our garage, pages of notes about wiring, cameras, and security systems he once repaired for the city library. The memory settled like a spark. That night, lying awake beneath Carla's quilt, I replayed Emily's words over and over. And somewhere between exhaustion and resolve, an idea began to take shape, quiet, methodical, and sharp as glass. I returned home 2 days later. The bruises had faded beneath a scarf, and my voice had settled into something quieter, steadier. The house smelled faintly of disinfectant, the kind Emily used when she wanted everything to appear spotless. She had left a note on the counter. Hope you're feeling better. Let's talk soon. The handwriting was graceful, the tone almost tender. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into a drawer. Then I began. My husband's old toolbox was still in the garage, right where he'd left it years ago. Inside, I found the small bag of parts he used to repair library security systems. Tiny cameras, screws, cables. I ordered newer pieces online under my maiden name and spent the evenings reading manuals by the dim kitchen light. It came back to me like muscle memory wiring, calibration, power flow. By Friday, the house was ready. Years helping at the library and tinkering with Daniel's tools made the setup possible. Another nestled among the books in the study. A third watched over the kitchen, hidden behind a small potted fern. Each one blinked once, then vanished into silence. I kept a logbook in my nightstand, time, date, any words that mattered. When I finished, I stood in the doorway, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the thermostat. You'll protect me now, I whispered to the walls. The next afternoon, Emily arrived with a pitcher of sweet tea and her brightest smile. David says you're doing better, she said, setting the glasses down. I'm glad. I was worried. Her eyes moved over the room, assessing, always searching for something she could rearrange. I let her talk, nodding when expected, letting her believe I was tired and fragile. But beneath that stillness, the cameras watched, recording every word, every look, every lie. And for the first time in months, I felt safe in my own silence. The afternoon sun hung low, spilling warm light across the dining room table. Emily sat across from me, her manicured fingers tapping against a folder she'd placed between us. David thought it might be easier if I handled this part, she said pleasantly. Just some paperwork regarding the house insurance, inheritance. Boring legal things. You only need to sign here. Her voice was sugar over steel. I looked at the papers, the neat paragraphs of legal phrasing, and saw my own name buried under a string of words that didn't belong to me. Transfer of ownership. I set my pen down. No. Emily blinked, surprised for only a second before her smile returned. Tighter now. Margaret, I'm trying to make things simpler for you. It's what David wants too. Then David can ask me himself, I said, keeping my tone calm. Something flickered in her eyes, an almost imperceptible crack. She leaned forward, her perfume heavy and sharp. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I stood. Please leave. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor as she rose. You think you're clever, she hissed. Always pretending to be the sweet old lady while everyone tiptoes around you. You've been a problem since the day I met you. I didn't move. The hallway camera blinked once. Silent. Patient. Emily's hand shot out faster than I expected. Her nails dug into my neck. The same pressure. The same whisper. Die quietly, Margaret. She breathed. Close enough that I could feel the words against my skin, but this time I didn't fight. I stood still, eyes fixed on the curtain swaying in the draft. My heart pounded, but my mind was clear. Behind her, the tiny lens glimmered faintly in the light. She let go after a moment, realizing I hadn't resisted. You see, she said, straightening her blouse. You always overreact. Then she smiled, almost triumphant, and walked toward the door. The sound of it closing echoed through the house like the final click of a lock. I waited a full minute before moving. My throat burned. My hands shook. But I managed to reach the drawer where the logbook waited. I wrote the date, the time, the exact words she'd said. Then I took the small hard drive from its hiding place and slipped it into my purse. By dusk, I was in Carla's kitchen again, my hands trembling as I set the drive on her table. The kettle whistled softly behind us. It's done, I said, and this time, my voice didn't shake. Detective Reed came to Carla's house the next morning. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a voice that carried a quiet authority. I handed him the hard drive wrapped in a linen handkerchief. He placed it carefully into an evidence bag, then looked at me. You understand this will go through verification, he said. If it's been altered in any way, it hasn't. I interrupted. I documented everything, dates, times, copies stored off-site. He nodded, impressed, but said nothing more. We watched the footage together on Carla's old television. The image was grainy, but the truth was sharp. Emily's hand at my throat, her whisper, the smirk when she walked away, it was all there, time-stamped in quiet, irrefutable sequence. When it ended, the room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Carla's hand found mine under the table. Later that afternoon, David arrived. He looked drawn, pale, as if sleep had become something foreign to him. Detective Reed replayed the clip, and David stood frozen before the screen. The color drained from his face. She said, you slipped, he murmured, almost to himself. I watched him, my voice calm. She slipped this time. He covered his mouth with his hand, eyes glistening. Mom, I didn't see. I almost pitied him. The man still trying to reconcile the woman he loved with the one on the screen. But pity was a luxury I could no longer afford. Detective Reed closed his notebook and rose from his chair. Mrs. Ellison, he said quietly, we'll take it from here. I nodded, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. The courtroom was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that seeps into bone rather than skin. I sat at the front beside Detective Reed, my hands folded on my lap. Across the room, Emily looked immaculate in a cream suit, her hair pinned perfectly in place. She smiled faintly when our eyes met, polished, practiced, unbothered. Her lawyer spoke first. painting her as the devoted daughter-in-law who had endured months of emotional strain caring for an elderly parent. Every sentence twisted into sympathy. Emily dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her tears carefully timed. David sat behind her, shoulders hunched, staring at the floor. When the prosecutor rose, the air shifted. "Your Honor," she said evenly, "we have one piece of evidence left to present." She turned toward the screen. The monitor flickered once, then came alive. The grainy hallway filled the room. Emily's voice, low but distinct, carried through the speakers. "Die quietly, Margaret." For a moment, no one breathed. Then came the sound of the struggle, the brief thud, the silence, the slow retreating footsteps. Gasps rippled through the courtroom like wind through leaves. Emily froze, her face draining of color. The judge's voice cut through the quiet. "Bailiff, take her into custody." Emily didn't look at me as the handcuffs clicked shut. David still couldn't lift his head. I didn't move. There was nothing left to say, nothing to prove. The truth had spoken in my place, clear, unshaken, undeniable. When they led her away, I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long while, the silence felt like peace. Spring returned slowly to Savannah, the kind that arrived on a whisper rather than a storm. I moved back into the house on Monterey Square in early March, carrying only what I needed. The locks were new now, the air lighter. The rooms had been repainted, though I kept one thing the same, the faint trace of lemon polish my husband used to love. The first night alone, I walked from room to room, touching the familiar edges of my life. The house no longer felt haunted, it felt honest, even in its quiet. In the weeks that followed, I began volunteering at the library again, teaching a small group of seniors how to navigate online security. They listened carefully as I explained passwords and privacy settings. And sometimes, I caught myself smiling. They thought I was patient. In truth, I just understood what it meant to feel vulnerable and how powerful it was to learn protection in silence. By evening, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the street lamps blink to life beneath the oaks. The city hummed softly, its sounds distant but familiar. The porch light my husband had wired decades ago still worked, steady and bright. I reached up and switched it on. "This light isn't for waiting anymore," I whispered. "It's for peace." The phone buzzed beside me, a message from David. "Mom, I'm sorry." I looked at the words for a long time before setting the phone down. The night air was cool against my skin. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to chime, soft and deliberate, marking another hour that belonged entirely to me. I smiled and left the phone unanswered.